All right, we are on the air. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rhythm Setters by ThriveBeat. I'm Gary Schreiner, founder of ThriveBeat, and your host today. And my super awesome special guest today is Dr. Denise Hee, known as the Foodie Doc. Yes?
Yes, that's right.
And she is a medical doctor, a nutrigenomic. Did I say that right?
That's right. Yeah.
She practices nutrigenomic medicine, and it is absolutely fascinating. And I am so excited to have her on as a guest and to learn from her. And it's going to be amazing. I'm just really excited today. So thank you for being here, Denise.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited as well.
Awesome. So why don't we start by telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you do it. Why nutrigen? Oh, I'm going to mess that up.
Nutrigenomics. Yeah.
Nutrigenomic medicine.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to try and make this as concise as I can. My passion for nutrigenomics medicine basically started from a very personal mission of mine to help my husband. But I guess the story really begins back in 2008. So almost 10 years ago, I graduated from medical school. Just like a lot of other doctors, we were very gung-ho to fight disease, and we were very focused on treating symptoms. I am not really sure how it is nowadays, but back then we definitely didn't get enough training on nutrition and its impact on somebody's health. Mm-hmm. So when I was out in the real world and I started my practice, again, just like I'm sure many doctors still get nowadays, I had a lot of patients who were quite reliant on medications. They actually became regular customers, sort of, which I kind of feel is partly the result of the pharmaceutical industry's influence on the medical field, but it was also definitely partly my fault. And I say that because, like I said, I didn't really have the knowledge on how to properly educate my patients and how to properly motivate them to get their lifestyle under control so that they could have some power over disease prevention and disease progression. At the time, actually, the best thing that I could do for them was to refer them to a dietitian. We had a resident hospital dietitian, and a lot of my patients got referred to her. She did a good job, but of course, I kind of felt embarrassed that was all that I could really do for them. And it was made even worse when you do get the odd patient who was very into lifestyle modification and they actually knew more than me.
Wow.
So yeah, so eventually I decided to enroll in the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, which was amazing. It was really great. It opened my eyes and it really made me understand the impact of nutrition on health. In fact, during that course, we learned like 100 different types of diets. And it was also at that time that I found out my husband had metabolic syndrome. So this was, at the time we were newly married and he's 30 years old. Metabolic syndrome, in case you're not familiar, is a condition where you have high blood pressure, you've got increased waist circumference, you've got a high BMI, you've got high cholesterol, and it increases your risk of heart disease and diabetes, that whole spectrum of illnesses in the future. So here I had now all this knowledge about nutrition and the impact on health. And I had my husband, who obviously needed some kind of nutritional intervention. And I didn't know where to start because now I had 100 different dietary theories in my head. I didn't know which one to put him on. So I figured that there had to be a better way, something that was more precise, something that would give us an effect quickly. Because just like everybody else, when you're on a diet, you want results quickly, right? And that's when I really started getting into nutrigenomics and epigenetics, because it provides you with a much more tailored approach. That's really what it's all about. You use your DNA as a foundation, as a stepping stone, and then from there you get a much more personalized form of healthcare. And because it worked really well for him, he lost a lot of weight and his blood pressure is now normalized. This is why I continue on this mission of mine to use epigenetics and nutrigenomics as a way to provide a more personalized approach to healthcare, and I want to do it for as many people as I can. That's basically it.
Wow. That's great. So as a medical doctor, you did not, part of your training was not nutrition. It was...
No, I mean, we learn about digestion, what the digestive system does. We learn about, carbohydrates and how they're metabolized, the basic stuff. But we never touched really about gut health, all those recent topics which are becoming a lot more relevant. So gut health, nutrition, how to actually time your meals, how to actually figure out which diet works for you best, all that kind of thing we didn't touch in medical school. We were really into, okay, how does the intestine work? How does it absorb nutrients? What happens when the intestines don't function very well? How do you operate on the intestines? That kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. And so you had, first of all, you had patients coming to you and asking nutritional questions and finding you didn't have the answers that you wished you had, and sometimes they even knew more than you did.
Yeah.
And then your husband had metabolic syndrome, and so it began this journey for you that sounds like both a very personal one, but also a interesting professional journey as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I went from doing general surgery to now doing something completely different. But hopefully I'll still be able to help surgical patients in the future. But it is a very, very different field.
Great. Well, it's definitely something that is needed, and it's really exciting, I think, to see physicians who are open and willing to move in these directions, because it's something we can all benefit from. So I applaud you for doing that. It's awesome. So how then does, we hear a lot about nutrition, and it's important, and we should, and we hear about different diets, and we have to sort all this out. But how does nutrition really affect us, like our functioning? Let's say our brain. Let's start with that. How does nutrition affect our brain functioning, our mindset, and what does that mean? How does that matter?
Yeah, see, when you told me that this is what you wanted to talk about, I knew that I had to prepare something, because that topic is so vast. I mean, it can get quite complicated. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen. I've just prepared a very short PowerPoint just so that people can follow along. Let me just see.
That's great.
Right. So the effect of nutrition on the brain. How do we start? Basically, like I said, it's a very huge topic, primarily because nutrition and the brain, they're kind of a two-way street. You have your nutrition, which affects the brain, but you also have the brain, which affects nutrition. And that's where it gets a bit complicated. You see, the brain, obviously, it's very metabolically active, and it's really greedy because it needs a lot of nutrients to do everything that it does every day. It's very complex. It's got a lot of functions. I mean, all this, everybody knows, right? It's not just for learning. It's for memory function. It's for coordination of movement. It's for language, judgment, quality of sleep. It's for addiction. It's for productivity, everything. There's so many different areas. And all of these areas can be affected by nutrition somehow. But also they can be affected by other things like hormones, neurotransmitters, which are compounds that specifically target the nervous system. It's also affected by the gut bacteria, many other lifestyle factors, which all of them interplay with each other, and they affect how one is expressed over the other. Okay, so I think for today anyway, I'm just going to cover the cognition aspect of it. I'm not going to cover the mood regulation because I think that's just a bit too much for one day.
Right. Okay.
So I'm going to cover the actual thinking aspect, and I'm going to do this by covering three main groups of food. The BDNF boosting foods. We have the foods with healthy fats and the foods that contain a high level of antioxidants. Now, all of these foods, they help maintain the actual physical structure of the brain, and also improves the brain's capacity to learn new things, adapt to new environments. This is something that we call neuroplasticity. And then later on, I'll talk about the other side of it, the vice versa part, and talk about how mindset can actually affect nutrition. Is that okay?
That's great.
Yeah. So we'll start off with the BDNF boosters. BDNF is basically brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's a very long, fancy-sounding name, but it's basically the growth hormone of the brain. Okay. So it encourages the formation of new healthy cells and also supports the existing brain cells. So it's obviously very important for this concept of neuroplasticity that I mentioned, because for us to learn new things and for us to adapt to new environments, we need to ensure that our brain cells are healthy and they're ready to absorb and consolidate all this new information. But besides neuroplasticity, BDNF actually has other functions in the brain as well. So it's been linked to a reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease if you have increased levels of BDNF. It also helps in things like weight management and in regulating the sleep cycle. So in terms of brain health, obviously you don't have to be a doctor to know that you need enough sleep for your brain to function properly, right? I mean, if you just think back to the last time you had to go to a meeting or a lecture and you didn't sleep well the night before, obviously your retention of information, your understanding, it's not going to be at 100%.
Oh, I've never done that. No.
But, you know, the main thing is that in terms of BDNF, the more we have, the better it is. So we want to eat foods that will stimulate this BDNF gene. Okay, that's simple enough, right?
Yes.
And luckily, there are a lot of foods that can do that. So I'm just going to go through a few examples. Curcumin is one of them. Curcumin is a compound that's actually found in turmeric. It's the compound that gives turmeric its yellowish color. It's also a kind of phytonutrient. And this curcumin is actually absorbed by our body better in the process of another compound called piperine, which is black pepper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I suppose this is something that maybe Ayurvedic medicine practitioners must have known some time ago, because I mean, even until today, you see all the Indian curries have turmeric and pepper together.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah. The other compound is L-theanine. Now, L-theanine it's a kind of amino acid that you find in tea or tea extracts. It's basically useful for keeping you alert, but not giving you the jittery hands, the palpitations, those kind of side effects that you get with coffee. And on its own, of course, tea has a lot of other benefits besides boosting the BDNF. The third one, which works pretty well with BDNF as well, is adaptogenic herbs. So there's a few different types of them. Some people use rhodiola, some people take Bacopa monnieri, some people take Panax ginseng. They're all becoming really popular because we live obviously in a very stressful world nowadays. Mm-hmm. And what happens when we're stressed is that the amount of BDNF is reduced. So these herbs, they actually prevent that decline of BDNF that's associated with stress. They don't directly increase the production of BDNF. They basically increase the available amounts of BDNF in the body by preventing it from getting broken down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Have you heard of probiotics before?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's, the good bacteria that you find in the gut, and people take it as supplements or fermented food. Now I'm talking about prebiotics, because prebiotics are basically the food of the probiotics. So foods like asparagus or bananas, onions, potatoes, they all contain a kind of fiber which is called resistant starch, and it doesn't get digested, not by us. So it goes straight from the small intestine. It goes to the large intestine, which is where the majority of these good bacteria, these probiotics, that's where they sit and live. That's where they help us digest. But this resistant starch basically goes straight to them and they digest it, not us.
Oh,
The bacteria converts this starch into a compound that's called butyrate, and it's butyrate that increases the BDNF. Okay? Yeah. And so the last one then would be dark chocolate and other foods which are rich in magnesium, like pumpkin seeds or spinach. They also activate the BDNF pathway, which is great news for chocolate lovers, obviously. But
yes.
but just bear in mind that this is dark chocolate we're talking about, like 70% and over, ideally with no added sugar, definitely not milk chocolate. It just doesn't work in the same way for some reason. So if you had somebody coming in and they did a nutrigenomics analysis and it came back saying that they might benefit from a BDNF boost, there's obviously a lot of foods that you can choose from. You know, as I've gone through, this is not an exhaustive list.
Right.
And of course, things like exercise and meditation, they've also been shown to increase BDNF. So this is just one group of foods, even though there's already a lot in there. I'm going to go through two more. The second one is foods which contain healthy fats. Now, before I go a little bit more in depth, I just want to explain quickly that there are four main types of fats. There's the monounsaturated, there's the polyunsaturated, there's the saturated, and the trans fats. So when I say healthy fats, I'm talking about the mono and the polyunsaturated fats.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people nowadays, they kind of understand that fat is not the demon that it once was thought to be. It just really depends on knowing which type of fat you're consuming, right?
Yes.
So trans fats are those which are in deep fried foods, processed foods. That's the one that you need to avoid. Saturated fats, in terms of brain health, can be a problem when you have a specific genetic variant of this ApoE gene. So this ApoE gene, only one variant of it, but there is a variant that can lead to an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease if you take saturated fats. So again, this is a good example of how nutrigenomics can help mitigate your risk of future disease, because the minute you have your analysis done and you find out you have this gene, you can immediately take steps to reduce your saturated fat intake, and at the same time, you're reducing your Alzheimer's risk in the future. We're not changing the gene. The gene's still there. But what we're doing is we're working around the gene and finding ways to promote a healthier gene expression. So that's the epigenetic, that's the nutrigenomic aspect of it.
Okay.
But like I said, we do need fat because the brain is largely made up of fats. So we need to ensure that our diet actually has healthy fats that the brain can use as ingredients or as building blocks to heal the brain tissue if needed, or just to form new brain tissue. Now, monounsaturated fat and polyunsaturated fat, which includes these famous omega-3s, are what we want. And I'm just going to mention a few sources of this. Avocado is a really good one. Avocado has about 70% monounsaturated fat. Yeah, on their own, actually, avocados are already really full of vitamins. But because they're made of fat, they actually aid in the absorption of other vitamins, which depend on the presence of fat in order for our body to absorb them. They're called fat-soluble vitamins. So if you take those fat-soluble vitamins, but there's no fat in your body can't use those vitamins. When you take it with avocado, then they're able to be absorbed. Another good source is walnuts. And they actually say that foods which resemble, let me go back to that previous picture. Foods that resemble a specific organ are supposed to be good for that organ. So things like tomatoes, for example, are good for the heart. If you cut a tomato open, it's got, those 4 chambers from the seeds, kind of like the 4 chambers in the heart.
Oh, wow.
So it's supposed to be good for the heart. Things like kidney beans, which are shape of the kidney, is supposed to be good for the kidney. And walnuts, like if you look in this picture, they kind of look like brains, like with the grooves and everything. So they're good for the brain.
So does that apply for cauliflower too? Because that looks like a brain. Does that help your brain?
It does in a way, yes. It's definitely helpful for the brain. It's also good for the lungs.
Oh, yeah. I guess it does kind of look like lungs too.
Yeah. So actually, all nuts and seeds tend to be pretty good for you. But Walnuts in particular are high in a compound called ALA, or alpha lipoic acid, which is the plant-based form of omega-3 fatty acids.
Oh.
They also contain vitamin E and other things, but ALA is the one that's more specific for walnuts and brain health. And the third source is, as pictured here, the healthy fat from oily fish, krill, or algae. And this also is it's a source of polyunsaturated fats. So just now we were dealing with the monounsaturated fat in avocados. This is polyunsaturated fat. So these give you the two types of omega-3 fatty acids, which are DHA and EPA. Now, omega-3 it's actually considered an essential fatty acid. And basically what that means is our body can't make it on its own. It has to get it from food somehow. And everybody's requirements for omega-3, they differ a little bit. This daily requirement it's partly determined by the genetics as well. So there's three types, as I mentioned, the ALA, which is from plants, and then you have the DHA and EPA from animal sources. EPA is the one that's good for the heart, and DHA is the one that's specifically good for the brain. So it increases BDNF, which is what we were talking about earlier. It's a very powerful anti-inflammatory compound, and they've actually used it to reduce brain swelling in brain trauma patients. It also helps to strengthen the synapses, or the connections between the brain cells, so that allows them to talk to each other more effectively and send signals more efficiently. Yeah, so good quality fish. I mean, we're talking about fresh fish, which is not farmed, low mercury. So things like Alaskan wild salmon, sardines, herring, mackerel, they all contain a good amount of omega-3.
Okay.
Recently,
so if you're not,
sorry?
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, if you're not getting, for whatever reasons, enough of the food sources, say you're not eating salmon or mackerel, and maybe you don't even like it, how well do the, say, fish oil supplements or things like that work?
Yeah, fish oil supplements are good. Of course, it depends on the manufacturer. But let's say that you buy a really high quality one. As long as you're getting enough of it, it's a good replacement for fish. Now, of course, fish, when you eat the whole thing, when you eat the actual food, it has other things in it besides omega-3. Like if you take an omega-3 supplement, it's not going to contain the protein, for example, of the fish, right? So in that sense, of course, eating whole foods would be better. But in terms of omega-3, your body does still benefit from taking a supplement if you really don't take fish for whatever reason. But I'm going to come to this algae oil in a bit, because that's a really good choice, I guess, a good option, especially for people who are vegetarians and really don't take fish, or vegans.
Okay.
Unlike other plant sources, this algae oil actually has DHA and EPA. See, the ALA from plant sources, it is technically an omega-3 fat, but the body needs to convert it into EPA and DHA, because the body can only use DHA and EPA. The problem is that not all of the ALA is converted. Only a small percentage of it is converted. And how much is converted, how efficient that conversion system works, this is all genetically determined. So if you happen to have the genes which are not so efficient, for example, and you're taking in all the ALA you can in a day, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting enough DHA omega-3.
Oh, okay.
So fish oil, from fish, or like you said, a fish oil supplement is fine. You can take krill oil as well, which is a more recent supplement in the market. Not so recent. It's been around for a few years, but it's newer than fish oils anyway. So some people may not have heard about it. Krill oil it's good as well. It contains DHA, and actually they say that structurally it's easier for the brain to absorb it. There's more DHA available for the brain to use because it has a specific compound that prevents the DHA from going rancid. And then, like I said, algae oil is good for people who don't take fish, or don't really like fish for whatever reason.
Okay.
Yeah, so the third group of food is foods which are high in antioxidants. So as I mentioned earlier, the brain It's very metabolically active, and it needs a lot of oxygen to do all this everyday thinking, everyday activities, right? Which means that it's basically exposed to a lot of oxidative stress and free radicals. Free radicals are very unstable molecules, and in order to stabilize themselves, they go and attack surrounding cells. So they can cause damage to surrounding tissues. If you imagine an apple or an avocado that's been cut open and you leave it on the counter, after some time it gets brown, right? Mm-hmm. So that's oxidation. So that's basically oxidative stress attacking the apple or the avocado. But if you rub a little bit of lemon juice on it, it actually slows down that browning process because the lemon acts as an antioxidant. So oxidative stress, it's not something that you can stop or completely avoid, but it is something that you can slow down quite a bit. And by taking in a lot of foods which are high in antioxidants, you can definitely support the brain tissues better. So we're talking about things like colorful fruits and vegetables, which all contain different types of antioxidants, different types of polyphenols, different types of phytonutrients.
So you need a variety.
Yeah, eat a variety, eat a rainbow. That's what they say, right? Every day, eat a rainbow. Yeah. And berries, special mention for berries because they contain a lot of powerful antioxidants. They also have specific vitamins and other phytonutrients, which all help to stimulate BDNF production. So it works in both categories. It's a BDNF booster and also high in antioxidants. The only bad thing I would say about berries is that the Environmental Working Group, they put out a list every year of which produce is always contaminated with pesticides. And unfortunately, berries are always high on that list. Uh-oh. So, if you can, we always recommend to buy organic berries.
Okay.
And then the other one is extra virgin olive oil. That's a good example as well because it's a source of healthy fat. It's got a lot of vitamin E. But specifically for brain health and in terms of nutrigenomics, it contains this specific compound called OLE. OLE increases BDNF. It increases nerve growth factor receptor gene and CRTC3 gene, all of which basically protect against cognitive decline. And it actually even switches on this FOXO3 gene, and FOXO3 gene is what's known as the longevity gene. But again, just like berries, there is a drawback. You have to be careful of which type of olive oil you buy. The longer the olive oil has been sitting on the shelf, the more it's been refined, then obviously the less polyphenols it will contain.
Okay.
Yeah. But as you can see, there's a lot of things that you can put in your kitchen every day and build up an arsenal of foods that can keep your brain healthy. There's even other nutrients like choline from eggs or vitamin B from so many food sources which keep the brain healthy as well. It's just that I don't think we have time to get through them all, and that's why I'm focusing on these three,
that's
groups,
great.
right?
Yeah, and so we do have really do have a variety of foods that we can stock in our pantries and our refrigerators that can
absolutely. So the thing is, like I was saying earlier, what makes it complicated now is the effect of mindset on nutrition or the brain on your eating patterns and all that as well. Not just in terms of digestion, but also how you eat, what you choose to eat, those kind of things. And there's something called the black and white mindset, which basically means that if you go around labeling your food as good and bad throughout the day, or you're labeling yourself as a failure in dieting or a success in dieting, it's very clear black and white thinking. This can actually hinder your progress towards developing healthier eating habits. So if, for example, you're on this diet and you're doing really well, you're losing all the weight, and then suddenly, for whatever reason, you wake up one morning and you want to have a really sugary pastry for breakfast. Just, just accept it as a little bit of a setback. It's no reason to throw you off completely. It shouldn't be used as an excuse to pig out for lunch or have a whole mountain of dessert after dinner. Oh, because I've already ruined it for breakfast. It shouldn't be like that. It's just one meal. And basically that's how this black and white thinking can really derail you, because sometimes a cheat meal can be really good for your sanity.
So it's okay for me to have a donut once in a while.
Once in a while, as long as it's once in a while.
Okay.
And as long as the rest of your food is really good and it balances out. I mean, you're really looking for progress a lot more than perfection. That's much more important in terms of mindset.
Okay.
And the gut and the brain, it's so closely linked together that many people actually refer to the gut as the second brain. There's very clear sequence of events that happens when we eat something. Let's say if we take a piece of chocolate, for example. So you see this piece of chocolate and the image is picked up by your eyes. Okay, that image is sent to the cortex of your brain, which is the thinking part of it. And the image is translated, the information is sent to a specific area in the brain called the limbic system or the hypothalamus. And these are areas in the brain that regulate emotion. So they translate that sensory input from your eyes into actual physiological responses, which means that if you happen to like chocolate, then that image of chocolate is interpreted in a positive manner. So then the hypothalamus, those emotional areas of the brain, they send a cascade of signals down to your esophagus, to the salivary glands, to the stomach, and eventually stimulates the digestive process. And the chocolate gets, metabolized properly, digested properly. But now, on the other hand, if you don't like chocolate, or if you happen to be on a diet and you associate chocolate with guilt or the worry that you're going to get fat, and then you eat that chocolate, your hypothalamus is not sending the correct activation signals. It's not really sure what you want it to do, and basically the digestive response gets dampened, right? So there's not enough digestive enzymes released, which means that chocolate now is sitting in your gut for a longer period of time than it should. Oh. And of course, while it's sitting there, it's not metabolized properly. You're not getting all the nutrients that you could get from that piece of dark chocolate. It might even be harming your healthy gut bacteria by secreting some kind of toxic byproducts. But basically, this psychological stress that you feel when you're feeling guilty, or you're constantly telling yourself, oh, chocolate's going to make me fat, it can lead to a release of stress hormones like cortisol or insulin. And when these hormones are released, you actually store a larger proportion of the fat in the chocolate as body fat. Now, this basically means that your thought of getting fat, you are now releasing stress hormones, which actually absorb more fat. So then that thought becomes a reality. Now I'm not saying that if you eat whatever you want and your mindset is great, you're really positive and you're telling yourself, oh, I can eat whatever I want and I'm going to be skinny, it's not going to manifest that way either. Obviously, you need to find a balance, right? I'm just trying to illustrate that you're meant
I'm going to eat pizza and donuts all day, every day, and I'm going to be healthy because I have a positive attitude.
Yeah, I wish it worked that way.
Oh, I'm sure my kids wished it worked that way too.
No, unfortunately,
but our mindset does affect how
It definitely does. I mean, no superfood, no matter how super, can be fully healthy if you eat it in a stressful state of mind. And that's the other thing that you really have to remember, because stress not only diminishes your digestive capability, but it actually leads you to choose poorer quality foods. It actually it makes you eat more than you normally would, and choose foods that you maybe won't consume otherwise. So reducing the stress that's associated with eating and reframing that mindset is very, very important. And that's why I want to mention this. It's a very simple exercise by the Institute of the Psychology of Eating. It's called Thinking Nutritionally. And basically this exercise, you take all the one-liner thoughts that you normally tell yourself when it comes to food. It doesn't matter whether it's positive thought or a negative thought. So it can be things like, ice cream makes me break out in pimples, or salad is really good for me, or any food containing fat will make me fat, anything along those lines, but one-liner thoughts. And then you make a note which of those one-liner thoughts actually encourage a healthy metabolism, which ones encourage a positive relationship with food, and which ones don't. So next to the ones that don't, you basically write down a new thought. but you have to phrase it in a much more open-minded way, something that will inspire you. So you could instead write things like, I choose to let go of my fears about weight, or I will listen to my body and trust that it knows what it needs. Something along those lines, something to replace that mindset, so that now when that thought comes in, you have something immediately to reframe that thought. And the other way is to eat mindfully. Now, this is I guess something like a buzzword recently in the world of nutrition, but it is very important. And mindful eating is basically the practice of slowing down and allowing yourself the chance to fully enjoy the sensation of eating. So it's about paying attention and using your senses. And basically the first step is actually, you need to allocate enough time to finish your meal in a nice, relaxed environment. It doesn't matter whether you're alone or in a quiet place, or whether you're having a nice chat with friends and family in a restaurant. It doesn't matter where you are or who you're with, but the meal time can't be hurried. And a lot of people actually say a prayer before they eat, which it can be considered a form of mindful eating as well, because basically when you're doing that, you're slowing down, you're centering yourself before you eat. And during the meal itself, you want to just make sure that you're chewing properly. Some people give a guideline of about 20 chews per mouthful. And when you're first starting to do mindful eating, you really might have to count out to 20. But after a while, you do get the hang of it. Using your senses, it's basically before you shovel the food in your mouth, just think how it's actually presented on the plate, and take a moment to appreciate the color, the aroma, the texture, whether it sounds crunchy, things like that. And be fully present. Heighten your meal experience by avoiding distractions like the TV and the phone. I mean, the basic idea is basically to just slow down enough so that your nervous system is sending the right signals to your digestive system.
Okay, so things that a lot of people may think are just a waste of time, like, oh, a nice presentation, or chewing 20 times, or things like that, actually have a benefit to you physically, to how you are able to process the food.
Yep. That's why when you go to fine dining places, they can actually serve you such tiny portions because you get full on the visual aspect of it as well.
So instead of getting caught up in, they charged me how much for this little food, you should appreciate what you have.
They're helping you. They're helping you. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess basically the main takeaway message is that nutrition it's definitely a key player when it comes to brain health. And like I mentioned, there are a lot of powerful tools available. The other thing is that it's never too late to start. No matter how old or how young you are, there's always an aspect of improvement that can be achieved by adopting a healthier diet. And of course, nutrigenomics is a really useful tool. I know it sounds like a sales pitch. It's really not. I'm just telling you from my personal experience, I've seen really great results with it. And from the science behind it, it cuts out a lot of guesswork, confusion. It cuts out a lot of time wasting, and it pinpoints the best tools that will work with your particular combination of genes for your particular body.
Because everyone's genetics, everyone's biology is different. And so how we take in and process the food and everything else is different. So we should tailor it to the person. And that's amazing. So how does someone access nutrigenomic testing? How do they find out what they need to be eating to be most benefit to them?
It's done using a saliva swab. So it's very, there's no pain at all. It's not like a blood test that needs an injection. It's just a simple saliva swab. You send it to the lab and they come back with your genetic analysis. There are a few companies that do direct-to-consumer nutrigenomics, so-called. They produce a report for you, but in some cases it can be a little bit dangerous, especially if the person who's receiving that report doesn't really know how to interpret that report properly. So that's why I always try to coach my clients myself, and I always try to have that even if it's just one phone call, to just go through the report and make sure that they understand what is going on.
Okay, so you really need someone who understands what that report means and what the results mean to guide you through it, and not just kind of wing it on your own.
Of course, lifestyle is it's a long-term thing. You know, the goal is not just to lose weight for the summer, right? It's to lose weight for life. So you need somebody who is going to cheer you on, who is going to be there when you have questions, when you feel stressed, or when you have something that comes up in your life which you think might derail you from your health goals. And that's the point of working with an epigenetics coach or some kind of health professional who's trained in nutrigenomics in a long-term basis. It's not just like a once-off thing. Okay. Unless you're somebody who's so self-disciplined, which I think most people are not. I don't know.
I would agree. Probably most people are not. I found a select few. So how does someone find a nutrigenomics professional?
Well, I'm only going to tell you about me, obviously. So
absolutely, we want to know about you.
Yeah, my website is www.foodiedoc.com. It's FOODIEDOC.com. You just go on there. I have a bunch of packages. I've got some online programs. Just get in touch with me by email and I can walk you through the process. It's very, very easy. And we can send the kits basically anywhere around the world.
Oh, wow. Now that's a nice thing. Yes. Yeah. So you don't have to have a nutrigenomics expert in your town or whatever.
No. Most of the experts actually work virtually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like myself. I do virtual consultations for everybody.
Now, I imagine sounds like it's a fairly new field. Is that right?
It is a very new field, but it's very revolutionary, and there's a lot of research that's going into it at the moment because of the fact that it's very useful. So a lot of people are really trying to find out as much as they can about it, and that's why it's rapidly advancing.
Well, I think it's really exciting, and I think it is great. It's awesome what you're doing, and the benefits it can have for people are just enormous. So thank you for sharing.
I'm glad you see the value, and I'm so thankful that you gave me this opportunity to share with everybody because a lot of people are not aware, and I really do hope that more people benefit from it. It's amazing.
Well, we'll do what we can to help you get the word out there, and because I really can see the benefit to people, to not just your clients, my clients, but everybody. Everybody needs nutrition, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Let's make sure it's the right thing for them. And so this is amazing.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yes.
Great. Well, you have shared some amazing information, some wonderful tips, and I could just listen to you all day. I'd love to, absolutely. I'd go to an entire week-long course with you. This is awesome stuff. It's exciting. Thank you so much. So for those who watch this video, be sure you check out Denise's website, and I know I've looked at it. I know there's some great articles and other resources on there, and absolutely. So foodiedoc.com.
That's right.
So check out foodiedoc.com. You can contact Denise. You can learn more. At the very least, learn more, because it's amazing. It really is. And the benefits to you and others, I just don't know how you would even quantify them, because I mean, you are your mind and body, and that's
you only have one, so you have to take care of it.
Yep. Absolutely, take care of it.
There's a lot of free stuff on my website as well. So, even if you don't buy a package, like you said, just go learn something. Go download my free guide or go read some articles. There's a lot of stuff on there.
Awesome. Well, is there, I could go on and on and on with, I've got all sorts of questions I could go on and on with, but is there anything that you would like to add to what you've already shared with us?
Well, I guess on a day-to-day basis, if let's say you really can't, for whatever reason, get a nutrigenomics analysis, there is still a benefit of just normal healthy eating, right? So I think on a day-to-day basis, just keep in mind, ask yourself, how can I make this meal better? So always be trying to upgrade it. So if you're just eating an egg, for example, could you possibly buy an organic free-range egg? Could you maybe add some brain superfoods to it? Maybe add some turmeric and black pepper, or maybe add spinach. So then it's a spinach omelet, and you've upgraded your breakfast from just an egg to a spinach omelet, which has some brain superfoods. So in that way, you don't know exactly whether you have the right genes for it, or maybe it's not as personalized or precise as it could be, but you would still get some benefit. Mm-hmm. And of course, although I'm focusing on nutrition, it's a whole picture. It's a whole systems approach. So when we're talking about epigenetics, which is that's basically the umbrella term for all these lifestyle modifications that can affect the genes, right? You have things like sleep, like stress, exercise. All of these are also really important. I'm only focusing on nutrigenomics because that's my personal favorite branch of epigenetics, but they're all equally important.
Okay, great. So it really gets back to that mindfulness, just being aware of what you're eating, what you're doing on a daily basis, and how you can improve even just a little bit.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I want to be respectful of your time, and there's just a wealth of information and so much that we can learn. And I encourage anyone who watches this to go back and watch this over again, take notes, because there is just so much there. And
yeah, I hope that people do get benefit from it. And I've tried to make it simple. I know probably parts of it may have gone over people's heads. And like you said, that's why I made the presentation.
No, it's great. They can go back and look at it, and apply it. Like I said, take notes and apply it in your life, because that's really the key to anything. We can get all the knowledge in the world, but it doesn't do us a whole lot of good unless we actually apply it and do something with it.
Right. Exactly.
So wonderful. So I think we need to wrap up for today, but I'm going to ask Denise if you'll stick around for a minute after we sign off on the broadcast, and we can some things out. But
thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome. And I want to thank everyone who watches this or shares this now or in the future. Really, thank you so much for your support and for everything you do. And please support our guests, and they really give so much of themselves, and Denise has given so much today. So please go check out her website, her free resources, and if you think it's for you, and I think it is,
it's for everybody.
It's for everyone.
Yep.
Try one of your packages and try our services. I think you won't regret it. So thank you so much. We're going to sign off for today. Thank you for joining us on Rhythm Setters. Take what you learned, apply it, and make it an absolutely awesome day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Barry. Bye.